What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Today's account is going to change how you see human history. This comes from a geologist who was recruited for a classified mission in Antarctica in 2018. What they found 3 kilometers beneath the ice wasn't just ancient, it was advanced. A perfectly preserved chamber containing 12 beings from a civilization that achieved what they called collective enlightenment over 50,000 years ago. They left everything behind: knowledge, technology, a path to transcendence, but only if humanity proved worthy to receive it. This is the story of first contact with an enlightened species and how we failed the test. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and drop a comment if you've ever wondered what's really buried under Antarctic ice. This one will haunt you. Let's get into it. I'm a geologist, specialized in ice core drilling and polar research. I've spent 15 years studying glaciers, ice sheets, and ancient climate data locked in frozen layers. I thought I understood what was buried under Antarctic ice: compressed snow, trapped air bubbles, maybe microorganisms. Frozen history of our planet's climate. But in 2018, I was recruited for a mission that shattered everything I thought I knew. We found a chamber, 3 kilometers down, and inside that chamber were beings. 12 of them, perfectly preserved. Not frozen. Preserved in crystalline structures that generated their own light and heat. They'd been waiting there for 50,000 years. Waiting for the next intelligent species to find them. Waiting to teach us. To guide us, to share everything they'd learned, but we weren't ready. We failed their test, and I've carried that failure ever since. I was working at McMurdo Station in Antarctica, standard research contract, drilling ice cores, analyzing sediment layers. Nothing unusual, just climate data collection for my university. Then, in March 2018, 2 men arrived. They weren't dressed for Antarctica. Dark suits, polished shoes, completely out of place. They showed me Department of Defense identification, said they needed to speak with me privately. We went to an empty lab. They locked the door. One of them pulled out a tablet, showed me satellite imagery, thermal scans, ground-penetrating radar data, all focused on a location about 800 kilometers inland. The images showed an anomaly, a heat signature 3 kilometers beneath the ice. Geometrically perfect structure, right angles, symmetry. Nothing natural creates that kind of pattern. And the thermal reading was impossible. 15 degrees Celsius at that depth. They said a classified satellite had detected it 6 months ago. Multiple agencies investigated, determined it was artificial, ancient, and potentially technological. They were assembling a team, geologists, engineers, security personnel, all with top secret clearance. They needed the best. They offered me a contract, 6 months, triple my current salary, complete non-disclosure agreement. I'd be part of the drilling team, help reach the structure, document everything, classify everything, never speak about it. The terms were non-negotiable, sign or walk away forever. I asked what they thought it was. The man with the tablet looked at me seriously. His expression was grave, professional. We don't know. But preliminary analysis suggests it predates known human civilization by tens of thousands of years. Whatever built it wasn't supposed to exist. I had 72 hours to decide. Sign the papers and deploy. Or decline and forget this conversation ever happened. They made it clear refusal meant immediate reassignment. Transfer to administrative duties. Career effectively over. They couldn't risk me talking. Couldn't risk contamination of the discovery. Either I was in completely or I was out permanently. No middle ground. I didn't need 72 hours. I needed 10 minutes. This was the discovery of a lifetime. Potentially the discovery of human history. Ancient advanced civilization in Antarctica. Before the ice. Before recorded time. I signed. 3 days later, I was on a military transport heading deeper into the continent than I'd ever been, towards something that would change everything I believed about our past and our future. The flight was long, 6 hours over endless white. The plane was a C-130, military transport. No windows in the cargo area, just me and 12 other newly recruited specialists. Nobody talked. We'd all signed the same agreements. All understood the gravity. All felt the weight of what we were heading toward. When we landed, the cold hit immediately. -40 Celsius. Wind cutting like knives. We were ushered quickly into heated tents. The base was temporary but sophisticated. Military-grade equipment, generators, communications arrays. And in the center, the drilling rig, massive, industrial, already operational. Colonel Sarah Hendricks ran the initial briefing. She was career military intelligence, 20 years of classified operations. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. Showed us enhanced radar imagery of the structure. It was massive, approximately 200 meters in diameter, multiple chambers, central dome, radial passages, all perfectly geometric. The thermal signature came from the center. Something was generating heat down there after 50,000 years. That alone should have been impossible. She explained the drilling timeline. We'd work in continuous shifts, 24 hours a day, penetrate about 150 meters per day, reach the structure in approximately 3 weeks, then assess, document, and possibly make contact with whatever was down there. The team was diverse. Geologists like me, glaciologists who understood ice dynamics, engineers who operated the drilling equipment, linguists in case we found writing, archaeologists to contextualize any findings, and security. At least a dozen armed military personnel. Their presence made it clear. This wasn't just scientific discovery. This was strategic, national security. Whatever we found would be classified, controlled, weaponized if possible. That should have been my first warning, but I was too excited, too eager, too blind to see what was really happening. We began drilling immediately. The equipment was unlike anything in civilian use. Thermal drilling combined with mechanical augmentation, capable of penetrating ancient ice faster than any university project could dream of. The drill bit was diamond-tipped, cooled by liquid nitrogen. The shaft was reinforced as we descended. Steel casing preventing collapse. We worked in shifts, 6 hours on, 6 hours off. I supervised ice core analysis. Every meter we drilled produced samples. We examined them for anomalies, contamination, chemical signatures, and we found something strange almost immediately. The ice changed as we got deeper. Normal glacial ice has layers, annual bands, trapped air bubbles, dust particles, volcanic ash. It's like reading a history book. Each layer tells a story. But as we approached 2.5 kilometers depth, the ice became uniform. Too uniform. No layers, no imperfections. Just pure crystalline water ice. One of the glaciologists, Dr. Monica Chun, said it looked manufactured, like laboratory-grown ice, too perfect to be natural. Something down there had affected the ice itself, purified it, or possibly generated it. That's when we started realizing this wasn't just an ancient structure buried by glaciation. This was something that had controlled its environment, maintained itself, remained functional across 50 millennia. The drilling took exactly 19 days. On the morning of day 19, the drill suddenly dropped. Resistance vanished. We'd broken through into a void, a cavity, the chamber. Colonel Hendricks immediately ordered drilling to halt. We secured the shaft, reinforced the opening, then prepared to lower cameras. This was the moment we'd all been waiting for. The moment we'd see what was down there. The moment human eyes would witness something that had been hidden since before civilization began. We gathered in the command tent, 30 people, all staring at monitors, holding our breath. As the camera descended into the unknown, the feed came through grainy at first. Transmission through 3 kilometers of ice isn't perfect, but as the camera stabilized, the image cleared. We saw the shaft walls, smooth ice, almost polished. Then the camera emerged into open space, the chamber. And what we saw made everyone go silent. The space was enormous, cathedral-sized. The ceiling vaulted 30 meters above. Walls curved in perfect geometric arcs. And they were glowing, covered in symbols, thousands of them, each one emitting soft blue-green bioluminescence, creating their own light, illuminating the chamber without any external power source. After 50,000 years, still glowing, still active. The camera panned slowly, taking in every detail. The symbols weren't random. They formed patterns, sequences. Some looked mathematical, others linguistic. Still others were pictographic, showing images, stories, history. The linguists were already recording, taking screenshots, beginning analysis. Then the camera reached the center of the chamber, and we saw them. 12 crystalline structures, each one about 3 meters tall, hexagonal, translucent, and inside each one was a figure, humanoid, perfectly preserved, not frozen, not mummified, alive, or something like alive, suspended in crystal that pulsed with the same blue-green light. Their eyes were open, looking outward, waiting, and in that moment we realized we hadn't discovered a tomb. We'd discovered a vault, a time capsule, a message from a species we never knew existed. To us, the next intelligent life to rise on this planet, and they'd been waiting for 50,000 years for us to find them. The days after the camera discovery were chaotic. Everyone had opinions, theories, arguments about what we were seeing. The archaeologists insisted these were human ancestors, an unknown branch of Homo sapiens with advanced technology. The anthropologists disagreed, said the proportions were wrong, the skull structure too different. These weren't human. Or if they were, they diverged from our lineage hundreds of thousands of years ago. The biologists wanted tissue samples, genetic analysis, proof of what these beings were, but we couldn't access them yet. We'd only seen them through cameras. We hadn't reached them. That would require a descent team, and that required preparation. Colonel Hendricks assembled the descent team carefully. 6 people, 2 geologists including me, 1 archaeologist, 1 linguist, and 2 security personnel. We'd rappel down the shaft, enter the chamber, conduct initial assessment, document everything, take samples if safe, and most importantly, determine if there was any danger, biological, technological, or otherwise. We spent 3 days training, practicing rope work, equipment checks, communication protocols, emergency procedures. The shaft was narrow, 3 meters wide, over 3 kilometers deep. If something went wrong, rescue would be difficult, maybe impossible. We all signed additional waivers, acknowledged the risks, and prepared to descend. The descent took 4 hours. We rappelled in darkness, only our headlamps piercing the black. The ice walls were smooth, almost glassy, unnatural. At various depths, we passed markers left by the drill team, but mostly it was just endless descent, hand over hand, meter after meter. My arms burned, my back ached, but the adrenaline kept me going. We were about to enter a chamber that had been sealed for longer than human civilization had existed. We were about to see these beings up close, touch walls covered in unknown language, stand in a space created by minds we couldn't comprehend. The anticipation was overwhelming. We reached the bottom, the chamber entrance. We drilled into the ceiling of the dome, entered from above. We anchored our ropes, descended the final 20 meters into the open space. And the moment my feet touched the floor, I felt it. Warmth. The chamber was warm, 15 degrees Celsius. Impossible at this depth, this far below the ice. There was no geothermal activity here, no volcanic heat. The warmth came from the chamber itself, from the walls, from the crystalline structures, from the beings inside them. Everything was generating energy, sustaining itself. We'd found a facility that had maintained operational status for 50 millennia. That should not be possible with any technology we understood. The walls were incredible up close. The symbols weren't painted or carved. They were embedded in the stone itself, part of the material. glowing from within. Each symbol was about 10 centimeters across, intricate, beautiful. The linguist, Dr. James Park, immediately started photographing them, recording. He said they resembled no known writing system, not cuneiform, not hieroglyphics, not ancient Sanskrit, nothing. But they had structure, grammar. He could see patterns, repetitions, like language, but more complex, multidimensional. Some symbols changed when you looked at them from different angles, showed different meanings. It was linguistic technology, communication encoded at a level beyond simple writing. We approached the crystalline structures carefully, security first, weapons drawn, checking for threats. But there was nothing, no movement, no sound, just stillness. The 12 structures were arranged in a circle, facing outward. Each contained one being. We examined the nearest one. The being inside was tall, over 2 meters, humanoid form but not human. The proportions were elongated, limbs longer, torso narrower. The head was larger, elongated cranium, eyes were huge, closed or nearly closed, hard to tell through the crystal. The skin looked metallic, not metallic like metal, but reflective, shimmering, like it contained iridescent particles. And the being wore something, a garment or armor, organic-looking, seamless, integrated with the body, like it had grown rather than been put on. Dr. Park approached the crystal, placed his hand on it. The surface was smooth, slightly warm, and the moment he touched it, the crystal pulsed, brightened, the light intensified, and then we felt it, all of us, at the same time. A pressure in our heads, behind our eyes, not painful, just present, consistent, and then images, flooding into our minds, not through our eyes, directly into our consciousness. We weren't seeing, we were remembering, but these weren't our memories. They were theirs, the beings. They were showing us, communicating, teaching, all at once, all of us receiving the same information simultaneously. I saw their world. Not Earth as we know it, Earth before the ice, before the last glacial period. Antarctica wasn't frozen. It was a continent, green, warm, covered in forests and cities. And the cities were beautiful. Architecture that flowed like water. Buildings that seemed alive, grown rather than built. Technology integrated with nature, not dominating it, harmonizing with it. And I saw them, thousands of them, living, working, creating. They weren't primitive. They were advanced, far beyond us. They'd mastered energy, biology, consciousness. They'd transcended limitations we still struggled with, disease, aging, conflict. They'd solved it all. The images continued, faster now. Their civilization hadn't started this way. They'd evolved slowly, like us, struggled, fought wars, destroyed themselves partially. But they'd learned, grown, reached what they called collective enlightenment. They'd learned to share consciousness, pool knowledge, think as one while remaining individuals. It was the next stage of evolution, beyond individual intelligence, collective intelligence, true collaboration, true unity. And once achieved, everything changed. Scarcity ended, conflict ended, suffering ended. They became something new, something we couldn't fully understand, but something beautiful. Then the images darkened, showed catastrophe, the climate shifting, cooling, ice spreading from the poles. They knew it was coming, had predicted it. They could have left. Their technology allowed space travel. They could have gone to the stars, established colonies on other worlds, but they chose to stay, chose to preserve themselves here, in this chamber, in these crystals, suspended, waiting for the next intelligent species to evolve. For us, they left themselves as teachers, guides, a gift to the future. Everything they'd learned, everything they'd achieved, encoded in these walls, stored in their preserved minds, ready to share, but only if we were ready, only if we proved worthy, only if we approached with wisdom, not greed. That was the test. and we'd just begun taking it. The vision lasted maybe 10 minutes, but it felt like hours. When it ended, we were all on our knees, overwhelmed. Dr. Park was crying. The security officers looked shaken. One of them had vomited. I was trembling. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. We just experienced direct mental contact with beings who died 50,000 years ago. Or not died, suspended, preserved, waiting. We sat there in silence for a long time. Nobody spoke. What could we say? Words felt inadequate, trivial. We just witnessed the entire rise and fall of a civilization in compressed mental imagery. We'd seen what they'd achieved, what they'd become, and what they offered us. Colonel Hendricks was on the radio immediately, demanding report, wanting to know what happened, why we'd all gone silent. Dr. Park responded, tried to explain. But how do you explain telepathic contact? How do you describe receiving 50,000 years of history directly into your mind? He did his best, told her about the vision, the civilization, the offer, the test. She was silent for a long moment, then ordered us to take samples, document everything, and prepare for extraction. Extraction. The word felt wrong, violent. These beings weren't artifacts. They were people, teachers, waiting to help us. And we were talking about extracting them like resources. We continued exploring the chamber. There were passages leading out from the central dome, radial tunnels. We explored one. It led to another room, smaller, filled with more symbols and objects, crystalline devices, unknown function. One looked like it might be a power source, glowing, humming with energy. Another seemed computational, geometric patterns shifting inside crystal matrices. This was technology. But technology so advanced it looked like art, like nature. Everything was smooth, organic, beautiful, no harsh edges, no industrial aesthetic. This was what technology looked like when created by enlightened beings, when function and form unified completely. Dr. Park was documenting the symbols frantically, taking thousands of photographs, recording video. He said he needed time, months, maybe years, to even begin translating. But he saw patterns already, mathematical constants, physical equations, biological diagrams. The walls were a library, an encyclopedia, everything they'd known, written here, preserved, for us. If we could read it, if we took the time, if we approached with patience and respect. But I could tell Colonel Hendricks wasn't interested in patience. She wanted results, immediate, tangible, exploitable. That's what military operations do. Extract value, maximize strategic advantage. Understanding comes second. We spent 6 hours in the chamber, documenting, sampling, learning. The more we saw, the more we realized how sophisticated this was. The crystalline structures containing the beings weren't stasis pods. They were more. They were interfaces. The beings inside weren't just preserved. They were conscious, aware, watching, waiting. The crystals sustained their minds, allowed them to perceive, to think, to communicate. They'd been awake this whole time, for 50,000 years, waiting. That kind of patience was incomprehensible. That kind of dedication. They'd sacrificed everything, remained in suspended animation for millennia, just to teach whoever came next. That's enlightenment. That's compassion on a scale humans rarely achieve. One of the security officers, Lieutenant Marcus Webb, had been quiet the whole time, just observing, not participating. Finally, he spoke. "We shouldn't be here." We all looked at him. He continued, "This isn't a discovery. It's a sanctuary. These beings left themselves here as a gift, and we're treating it like a military operation, documenting for exploitation, not understanding, not learning, exploiting." Colonel Hendricks heard that over the radio, ordered him to remain professional, to remember his duty. But he wasn't wrong. We were approaching this wrong. We were thinking like conquerors, not students. And that was exactly the mistake they'd warned against in the vision. Before we left, I approached one of the crystalline structures again, placed both hands on it, tried to communicate. not with words, with intention, with thought. I projected gratitude, respect, curiosity, and I felt a response, faint, like an echo. The being inside was aware, was listening, and I felt sadness, disappointment, not anger, just sadness. Like a teacher watching a student fail a simple test. They'd given us the answer, shown us what we needed to learn, and we were still approaching with the wrong mindset, still thinking about extraction, about advantage, about power, instead of wisdom, instead of growth, instead of becoming what they'd become, enlightened. We ascended the shaft. It took 6 hours, climbing 3 kilometers with samples and equipment. By the time we reached the surface, I was exhausted, physically, mentally, emotionally. We were debriefed immediately. Colonel Hendricks wanted every detail, every observation, every measurement. We told her everything, showed her the photographs, the video, tried to convey what we'd experienced, but she focused on the wrong things. The technology, the materials, the power generation. She wanted to know if we could replicate it, if we could extract the beings, study them in controlled facilities, learn their secrets through dissection if necessary. Dr. Park objected, said that would be catastrophic, would destroy everything. The beings weren't just biological organisms. They were consciousness suspended in crystalline matrices. Removing them from the chamber would kill them, or worse, trap their consciousness in an inert state. Unable to communicate, unable to teach. We'd lose everything. Colonel Hendricks said that was speculation, said we wouldn't know until we tried, and orders from above were clear. Retrieval was priority 1. The beings would be extracted, transported to a secure facility, studied comprehensively. We were scientists. Our job was to facilitate that, not to question it. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing the vision. The civilization, what they'd achieved, what they'd sacrificed, and I kept feeling that sadness, that disappointment. We'd been given a gift, a chance to learn from beings who'd transcended everything we struggled with, and we were responding with violence, with greed, with the exact mindset they'd warned against. The test wasn't whether we could find them. The test was how we'd respond once we did, and we were failing, spectacularly, predictably. We were proving we weren't ready, weren't worthy, weren't evolved enough to receive what they offered, and I didn't know how to stop it, didn't know how to make command understand. So I just lay there, in my tent, staring at the ceiling, knowing we were about to make a terrible mistake. The next morning, Colonel Hendricks announced her plan. We'd send a larger team down, engineers, medical personnel, extraction specialists. They'd assess the crystalline structures, determine how to safely remove one, transport it to the surface, then to a secure facility in the continental United States. There, with proper equipment and controlled conditions, we'd study it comprehensively, learn everything we could about the beings, the technology, the preservation method, everything. It was framed as scientific necessity, but we all knew what it really was. It was acquisition, military acquisition of strategic assets. Dr. Park protested formally, submitted a written objection, cited scientific ethics, cultural preservation protocols. He argued that removal constituted destruction, that these beings deserved respect, that we should study them in situ, learn from them on their terms, not ours. Colonel Hendricks rejected the objection. Said ethics were secondary to national security, said this discovery was too important to handle delicately. Other nations would eventually learn of it, would try to access it themselves. We needed to secure everything first. Establish control, that was priority. Understanding could come later. The extraction team went down 3 days later. 10 people. They brought equipment, hydraulic lifts, reinforced containers, power tools. They approached the nearest crystalline structure, began examining it, testing its durability, trying to determine how it was anchored to the floor, whether it could be moved intact or whether they'd need to cut it free. The whole approach was industrial, mechanical. No reverence, no respect. Just engineers solving a logistics problem. How to move a large, fragile object through a narrow shaft up 3 kilometers of ice. I wasn't part of that team. I'd been reassigned to surface duties, analyzing samples, writing reports, but I monitored the radio, heard everything. They attached sensors to the crystal, measured its composition, its resonance frequency, its response to various stimuli, and the crystal responded. Just like before, it pulsed, glowed brighter, and everyone in the chamber felt it, the presence, the consciousness, reaching out, trying to communicate. But this time the message was different, not welcoming, not teaching, warning. They could feel it. Even the engineers who'd experienced nothing before, fear. The beings were afraid. One of the engineers placed a diamond-tipped saw against the crystal base, began to cut, to sever the structure from the floor. The moment the saw touched crystal, everything changed. All 12 structures flared, bright, blinding. The chamber filled with light, and the telepathic pressure intensified. Everyone collapsed, clutching their heads, screaming, not from pain, from information. Too much information, flooding in too fast. Images, warnings, consequences. The beings were showing them, showing us. What would happen if we continued? What we'd lose? What we'd destroy? Not just them, ourselves. The vision was apocalyptic. I wasn't in the chamber, but I felt it, through the radio, through the screams. The beings showed our future. If we failed their test, if we chose exploitation over enlightenment, they showed wars. Not nuclear, worse. Wars fought with technology we'd steal from them. Technology we didn't understand, couldn't control. Weapons that would tear reality itself. Millions dead, billions, civilization collapsing. Not from external threat, from our own hands, from our own greed, from taking power we weren't ready for. The saw stopped. The engineer dropped it. Everyone in the chamber was on the floor, some unconscious, others sobbing. The medical team went down immediately, emergency extraction. They brought everyone up, treated them for trauma, psychological shock. They'd all seen the same vision, all received the same warning, and they were changed. You could see it in their eyes. They'd glimpsed the future, our future. If we didn't change, if we didn't learn, if we didn't choose differently, Colonel Hendricks ordered a 48-hour stand down. Let everyone recover. Process what happened. But she didn't cancel the extraction, didn't change plans. She classified the vision as a defensive mechanism, psychological warfare. The beings were protecting themselves, using fear, manipulation, to prevent us from studying them, but that didn't mean we should stop. It meant we should proceed with caution, with better preparation, maybe with sedation, with psychological countermeasures. The beings had shown their hand, revealed their capability. Now we could defend against it. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. We'd been shown consequences, been warned, then given a clear choice, learn our way, or face destruction. And command was interpreting it as hostility, as threat, as something to overcome, not as wisdom, not as teaching. We were failing the test so completely, it would be funny if it wasn't tragic. The beings had sacrificed everything to guide us, and we were responding with violence, with force, with the exact mindset that would doom us, just like they'd shown, just like they'd predicted. Dr. Park came to me that night, asked if I believed the vision, if I thought it was real. I said yes, absolutely, because it made sense. We take advanced technology before we're ready. We weaponize everything, always have. Always will. That's human nature. That's our history. These beings knew that, recognized that, and they were warning us, begging us, choose differently, grow, evolve. Before you destroy yourselves. He agreed, said we needed to stop the extraction, had to convince command. I asked how. We had no authority, no power. He said we had truth, and sometimes truth was enough. I wasn't convinced. but I didn't have a better idea. Over the next week, more teams descended into the chamber. Each one had the same experience. The moment they touched the crystalline structures, they received visions, communications, sometimes welcoming, sometimes warning, always specific to what the person needed to see. The beings were reading us, understanding us, adapting their message. They weren't just broadcasting. They were teaching, individually, personally. It was sophisticated, compassionate, exactly what you'd expect from enlightened consciousness. But Command interpreted it differently, saw it as confirmation that the beings were conscious, aware, and therefore could be interrogated, exploited, their knowledge extracted through persistent contact. Dr. Park spent those days in the chamber, studying symbols, trying to translate. He made breakthroughs. The language wasn't linear. It was holographic, multi-layered. Each symbol contained multiple meanings, depending on context, on what symbols surrounded it, on the viewer's understanding. It was language designed for enlightened minds, for beings who thought in dimensions we barely understood. But he found keys, mathematical constants, physical laws, universal truths that transcended language. Using those as anchors, he began decoding. And what he found was extraordinary. The walls contained instructions, detailed, comprehensive, how to achieve collective enlightenment, step by step. It wasn't mystical, wasn't religious. It was technological, biological, neurological. The beings had engineered their own evolution, modified their brains, created neural interfaces, allowed minds to link, share, synchronize, first in pairs, then their entire civilization. And once linked, everything changed. Knowledge became universal. Innovation accelerated. Problems that seemed impossible became solvable, because millions of minds could work on them simultaneously, collaboratively, without ego, without competition, just pure collective intelligence. The instructions were clear. Start small. Develop the interface technology. Test it carefully. Expand gradually. Never force. Never rush. Evolution can't be hurried. It has to happen naturally, organically, with consent, with wisdom, and most importantly, with ethical foundation. Collective enlightenment only works if individuals choose it. If the collective values individual consciousness, respects diversity, celebrates difference within unity, otherwise it becomes tyranny, hive mind, loss of self. The beings had learned that, nearly destroyed themselves learning it, and they'd written the lessons here for us so we wouldn't make the same mistakes. But there was another message, woven throughout, a warning. The path to enlightenment was narrow, difficult, and there were other paths, easier paths, paths that looked like progress but led to destruction, weaponized collective consciousness, forced integration, mind control. These technologies could be used wrong, very wrong, and if used wrong, they'd end civilization, create suffering beyond imagination, enslave minds, destroy individuality, create hell on earth. The beings were warning us. This knowledge is powerful. Use it wisely, or don't use it at all. Better to remain as you are than to become enlightened wrong. Dr. Park presented his findings to Colonel Hendricks, showed her the translations, explained what the beings were offering. A path, a choice. We could follow their instructions, develop slowly, ethically, with wisdom, and eventually join them, become enlightened, transcend our limitations. Or we could ignore it, continue as we are, remain fractured, individual, limited. Both options were acceptable. The beings weren't judging. They were just offering, showing what was possible, what they'd achieved, what we could achieve, if we chose. Colonel Hendricks listened, asked questions, seemed genuinely interested. Then she asked the key question, can we weaponize it? Dr. Park went pale, said no, absolutely not. That was the worst possible application. That would lead to exactly the catastrophes the beings had warned against. She asked again, but theoretically, if we needed to, Could we develop this technology for military advantage? He said yes, technically, but we shouldn't, mustn't. That was the test. That was the whole point. The beings were offering enlightenment, and we were asking how to turn it into weapons. We'd already failed. Colonel Hendricks said she understood his concerns, but her responsibility wasn't ethics. It was national security. If this technology existed, America needed it first, needed to control it, because if we didn't, someone else would. China, Russia, some rogue state, and they wouldn't hesitate to weaponize. So we had to, defensively, preemptively, to maintain strategic balance. It was the same logic that justified nuclear weapons, biological weapons. Every weapon we promised never to use but developed anyway, just in case, just to stay ahead. And now collective consciousness would join that list. I realized then we'd lost. We'd been given the greatest gift in human history, the knowledge to transcend ourselves, to become something better, and we were going to turn it into weapons, into tools of control, into instruments of suffering. Exactly what the beings feared, exactly what they'd warned against. They'd waited 50,000 years, preserved themselves, sacrificed everything, to teach us, and we were going to weaponize their teachings. We weren't students, we were thieves, grave robbers, taking what we wanted, destroying the rest, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. Dr. Park tried one last time, submitted a formal ethics complaint, requested external oversight, called for the involvement of the United Nations, of international scientific bodies, said this discovery was too important for one nation to control, too dangerous for military management. He was relieved of duty within hours, escorted off-site, threatened with prosecution if he spoke publicly, classified everything he'd learned, made him sign new NDAs, with criminal penalties. He was silenced, effectively, completely, and with him gone, there was no one left to argue, no one left to object, just military personnel and government scientists following orders, doing what they were told, extracting value, securing advantage, failing the test completely. 2 days later, Colonel Hendricks ordered final extraction. They'd refined the method, developed a technique to remove one crystalline structure intact, without cutting, without damaging, using acoustic resonance, vibrating the structure at specific frequencies, disrupting its anchoring. It would take time, days maybe, but it would work. And once they had one on the surface, they'd study it, reverse engineer the preservation technology, access the being's consciousness directly, force communication, extract everything they knew, every technique, every technology, everything, by any means necessary. The decision was final, irreversible. The extraction would begin tomorrow. I didn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about the beings, about what they'd seen in their 50,000 years of awareness. Had they watched the ice form, watched glaciers grow, watched the world forget them, watched species rise and fall above their frozen tomb? And through all of it, had they maintained hope, belief that eventually someone would find them, someone worthy, someone ready? And now we'd arrived, and we weren't worthy, weren't ready. We were exactly what they feared, violent, greedy, short-sighted, repeating every mistake they'd overcome, falling into every trap they'd escaped. And they had to watch it, conscious, aware, unable to stop us, unable to even scream, just witness, as we destroyed everything they'd preserved. The extraction team assembled at dawn, 20 people this time, engineers, technicians, military personnel. They descended the shaft with their equipment, acoustic generators, resonance calibrators, lifting harnesses, everything needed to remove one crystalline structure and transport it to the surface. Dr. Park was gone. I was forbidden from descending, so I monitored from the command tent, listening to radio chatter, watching video feeds from helmet cameras, feeling helpless, useless, complicit. They entered the chamber, set up equipment around the nearest crystalline structure, the same one we'd first touched, the one that had first communicated. They ran tests, measured its resonance frequency, calibrated the acoustic generators, prepared to begin the extraction process, and the being inside watched, eyes open, fully aware, knowing what was coming, unable to prevent it. I could see it in the video feed, could see the being's face through the crystal, and I swear I saw resignation, acceptance, like someone watching a tragedy unfold, knowing they'd done everything possible to prevent it, and failed anyway. The acoustic generators activated, low-frequency sound waves, precisely tuned. The structure vibrated, began to resonate. The light inside pulsed, faster, brighter. The engineers reported success. The anchoring was weakening, disrupting. A few more hours and they'd be able to lift it, transport it through the shaft, bring it to the surface. They were excited, celebrating. They'd solved the technical problem, accomplished the mission, secured the asset. And they didn't understand, didn't see. They'd just sentenced someone to death, not physically, consciously. They were killing enlightenment. Then the other 11 structures activated, all at once, synchronized. They flared brilliant, blinding white light. The entire chamber filled with radiance, and the telepathic pressure hit, harder than ever before. Not just the extraction team, everyone on the surface. Intense. Everyone within kilometers felt it. A presence, vast, powerful, desperate. The 11 remaining beings had linked, combined their consciousness, amplified their message. This was their last attempt, their final plea, and everyone heard it, felt it, understood it. The message was simple, clear, unmistakable. Stop. We offer peace. We offer knowledge. We offer evolution. But you must choose freely. You must approach with wisdom. If you take by force, you take nothing. The knowledge will die. The technology will fail. We will close. Forever. This is your choice. Your test. Choose wisely. Choose now. It wasn't a threat. It was a fact. A line they would not allow us to cross. Take what was offered freely, or lose everything trying to steal it. The extraction team hesitated, stopped working. They'd felt the message, understood it. Some were ready to quit, to walk away, to honor the being's wishes. But Colonel Hendricks ordered them to continue. Said it was psychological manipulation, defensive mechanism, empty threat. The beings couldn't actually stop us. They were trapped, helpless. We had the power, the technology, the advantage. We'd extract the structure whether they cooperated or not. And once we had them in a controlled facility, we'd make them talk, make them teach, make them give us everything, by force if necessary. The acoustic generators ramped up, increased power. The crystalline structure vibrated harder. The anchoring failed. The structure lifted, separated from the floor, suspended in the lifting harness, free, mobile, ready for transport. The engineers cheered, reported success, began preparing to move it toward the shaft, toward the surface, toward laboratories and dissection tables and forced interrogation. They'd won, completed the mission, secured humanity's future, or so they thought. And then every crystalline structure went dark, simultaneously. The light died, the glow vanished, the chamber plunged into darkness. Only our artificial lights remained. The engineers panicked, checked equipment, thought they'd caused a malfunction, but they hadn't. This was intentional, deliberate. The beings had made their choice. If we took by force, they'd give us nothing. They'd close, shut down, retreat into some unreachable state, die if necessary, rather than let their knowledge be weaponized, rather than watch us destroy ourselves with gifts we'd stolen. They chose oblivion over violation. The engineers tried everything, restored the structure to its original position, deactivated equipment, tried to communicate, apologize, promise better intentions. Nothing worked. The crystals remained dark, inert. The beings inside were gone, not dead, just gone, retreated so deep into whatever state sustained them that we couldn't reach, couldn't touch, couldn't force. All 12 of them, silent, dark, closed, and with them went everything. All the knowledge, all the technology, all the teachings, all the wisdom of a 50,000-year-old enlightened civilization, lost because we couldn't pass a simple test, couldn't approach with respect, couldn't accept a gift without trying to steal more. The chamber felt empty, dead, like a tomb now, actually a tomb. We'd killed them, not physically, but killed them nonetheless, killed their purpose, their mission, their 50,000-year wait. They'd preserved themselves to teach, and we'd proven we couldn't be taught, wouldn't be taught. We'd failed spectacularly, failed at the most basic level. We'd been given wisdom freely, and chosen violence instead. The beings had judged us, tested us, and we'd failed, completely, irrevocably, and now we'd never get another chance. The aftermath was chaos. Colonel Hendricks ordered immediate extraction. Get everything to the surface. The crystalline structures, the symbols, samples of the walls, everything. If the beings wouldn't teach willingly, we'd study them forcibly. Reverse engineer everything. Eventually we'd understand. Eventually we'd unlock the technology. It would just take longer, be harder, but we'd persevere. We always did. That was human determination, human ingenuity. We didn't need their permission, didn't need their cooperation. We'd figure it out ourselves. But the engineers reported problems. The crystalline structures weren't lifting properly anymore. The material had changed, become heavier, denser, as if the beings had somehow altered the physical properties, made extraction impossible, or at least extremely difficult. The acoustic resonance technique no longer worked. The structures were anchored more firmly than before, rooted, and when they tried to cut, the crystal resisted. Dulled diamond blades, absorbed laser energy. It was defending itself, or the beings were defending it, even in their closed state, even unreachable. They were still protecting their knowledge, still enforcing the boundary we'd tried to cross. Dr. Park's ethics complaint reached higher channels, despite the NDAs, despite the threats. He'd filed it with international scientific bodies before being removed, and those bodies demanded access, demanded oversight. The discovery was too significant, too important. One nation couldn't control it, couldn't classify it completely. There were treaties, agreements. The Antarctic Treaty specifically forbade military operations, weapons testing, national appropriation. What we were doing violated everything. Multiple countries filed diplomatic protests, demanded transparency, demanded international cooperation. The political pressure was enormous, immediate, unavoidable. Command tried to cover it up, deny everything, say it was routine glaciological research, nothing unusual, nothing discovered. But too many people knew, too many contractors, too many scientists. Leaks started, anonymous sources, blurry photographs, testimonies. The story broke. Not completely, not accurately, but enough. Enough that the secret was compromised. Enough that maintaining complete control became impossible. The world knew something had been found, something significant, and they demanded answers. The U.S. government faced a choice. Come clean, share the discovery, cooperate internationally, or double down. Classify everything harder, deny, discredit, disappear witnesses. They chose the latter, shut down the operation entirely, evacuated the site, sealed the shaft with explosives, collapsed the access tunnel, buried everything. The chamber, the beings, the knowledge, all of it, buried under 3 kilometers of ice again, made inaccessible to everyone. If America couldn't have it exclusively, nobody would have it. Better buried than shared. That was the decision. I was there when they detonated the charges, watched the shaft collapse, watched our access destroyed, watched 50,000 years of waiting end in violence, buried alive. The beings were conscious down there, aware, knowing what we'd done, knowing we'd chosen to destroy rather than share, rather than learn, Rather than grow, they'd offered everything, and we'd buried them, sealed them away, ensured nobody could benefit. If that's not evil, I don't know what is. The team was disbanded, dispersed, reassigned to different projects, different continents, made sure we couldn't communicate, couldn't coordinate, couldn't organize resistance. We all signed new NDAs, stronger ones, with criminal penalties, lifetime surveillance. Any disclosure would result in immediate arrest, prosecution under espionage laws, decades in prison. They made sure we understood. Silence wasn't requested. It was mandated, enforced, permanent. Dr. Park was charged with violating security protocols, faced years in federal prison. He accepted a plea deal. No jail time in exchange for complete silence. Lifetime gag order. He couldn't speak, couldn't write, couldn't teach. Everything he'd learned, everything he'd translated, classified, locked away, his life's greatest discovery, and he couldn't share it with anyone, ever. I watched him during the sentencing, watched the light die in his eyes. He looked broken, defeated, destroyed, not by the punishment, by the waste, by the knowledge that humanity had been given a chance to evolve and chosen regression instead. I left Antarctica a month after the collapse, flew home, tried to resume normal life, but nothing was normal. Nothing felt real. I'd seen enlightenment, touched it. Literally, I'd communicated with beings who transcended everything we struggle with, and I'd watched us destroy it, deliberately, consciously, with full knowledge of what we were losing. We'd been tested, and we'd failed, not because we couldn't understand, but because we chose not to. Chose violence over wisdom, control over cooperation, power over peace. That's who we are. That's what we are. And the beings knew it, had always known it. That's why they tested us, and we proved them right. For months, I debated whether to speak, whether to violate the NDAs, risk prison, risk worse, just to tell the truth, to make sure someone knew, someone remembered, that we'd been given a chance and thrown it away. But what would that accomplish? Would anyone believe me? Would anything change? Probably not. People believe what they want to believe, and most people want to believe we're special, that we're advancing, that we're good. They don't want to hear we failed the most important test in human history, failed spectacularly, failed deliberately. So I stayed silent, like everyone else, like we'd been ordered to, like cowards. It's been 6 years since Antarctica, 6 years of carrying this secret, this weight. This knowledge of what we found and what we lost. I've tried to move on, return to normal research, published papers on glaciology, climate data, mundane science, but it all feels hollow, meaningless. I've seen what's possible, what we could become, and now I'm studying ice cores, measuring millimeters of climate change, while the knowledge to transcend climate change entirely is buried under 3 kilometers of ice, unreachable, because we chose to bury it rather than share it, rather than learn from it. I think about the beings constantly. Are they still conscious? Still aware? Trapped in darkness now. The chamber sealed. No light. No contact. No hope of future discovery. Did we condemn them to another 50,000 years of waiting? Or longer? Or did they finally die? Finally release themselves from consciousness? Give up? I don't know which would be worse. Eternal awareness alone in the dark, or death, extinction, failure of their mission after 50 millennia of patience. Either way, we did that. We caused that by failing their test, by choosing wrong, by being exactly what they feared we'd be. Sometimes I wonder if they knew, if they predicted this exact outcome, predicted we'd find them, fail their test, bury them again. Maybe that was the real test, not whether we'd approach with wisdom, but whether we'd choose wisdom when faced with easier alternatives, when faced with the temptation of power, of control, of military advantage. Maybe they knew most species fail that test. Maybe we're not unique. Maybe we're typical, average, predictable, just another violent species that destroyed itself. just like dozens before us, just like the ones they showed us in their warnings. And that's the most depressing thought of all, that we're not special, not unique, just another failure in a long list of failures. The world moved on. The leaks faded. The story became conspiracy theory, debunked, dismissed, crazy talk. Nobody believes anything was found. Nobody believes enlightened beings existed. Nobody believes we failed a test. It's all paranoid fantasy. Government cover-up stories told by attention seekers. And maybe that's for the best. Maybe it's better people don't know, don't understand what we lost. Because if they did, they'd have to confront what we are, what humanity is. And that's too painful, too damning. Better to remain ignorant, better to believe we're good, we're advancing, we're special, than to know the truth, that we're violent, short-sighted, doomed, and too arrogant to accept help when offered. I've followed Antarctic research since leaving, watched for any indication someone else found the chamber, rediscovered it, maybe approached it differently, with wisdom instead of greed, but nothing. The site remains buried, sealed, forgotten. Officially, it never existed, just another blank space on the map, another secret buried under ice, and maybe it'll stay that way. Maybe the beings will remain there forever, waiting, hoping that someday, somehow, some species will find them, pass their test, learn their wisdom, and break the cycle of violence and self-destruction that claimed so many others. Maybe humanity gets another chance, in a few thousand years, after we've evolved, matured, grown up, or maybe not. Maybe we'll destroy ourselves first, fulfill the vision they showed us, prove their warnings correct, and the beings will keep waiting, forever, for students who never arrive. I'm recording this now because I'm old, sick, cancer, months left maybe, and I can't take this secret to my grave, can't let it die with me. Someone needs to know, needs to understand what was found, what was offered, what was lost. So I'm violating my NDA, breaking my oath, risking nothing because I'm dying anyway. What can they do? Arrest a dead man? This is my testimony, my confession, my warning. We found enlightenment, literally, physically, real enlightened beings who transcended everything we struggle with, and we failed them, failed their test, failed ourselves, failed our future. The chamber is still there, under the ice. The beings are still there, waiting. If anyone's listening to this, if anyone has the resources, the authority, the wisdom, go back, find them, approach them differently, with respect, with humility, with the willingness to learn instead of the desire to take. Pass the test we failed. Learn what they're offering. Save humanity from itself, because we're running out of time, running out of chances. The climate is collapsing. The wars are escalating. The weapons are proliferating. We're on the exact path they warned against, the path to self-destruction. And the knowledge to avoid it is right there, under the ice, waiting for someone worthy enough to receive it. I don't expect anyone to believe me. I have no proof, no evidence. It's all classified, buried, destroyed. Just my word. The word of a dying old man with nothing to gain from lying, but I'm telling the truth. Every word. I was there. I saw them. I touched them. I communicated with them. I felt their wisdom, their patience, their compassion. And I watched us destroy it all, through greed, through fear, through the arrogant belief that we knew better, that we could take what we wanted, use it how we wanted, without consequence. We were wrong, and I've carried that knowledge for 6 years, and now I'm giving it to you. Do with it what you will. Believe it or don't. Act on it or ignore it. But know this, we had a chance, a real chance, to become something better, and we chose to stay exactly as we are, violent, divided, doomed. That's our legacy. That's our choice. And that's what I'll die knowing. The beings gave us everything. Knowledge, technology, wisdom, a path to transcendence, a way to solve every problem we face, end war, and suffering, and limitation. Become enlightened, become whole, become what we could be. And we responded with violence, with theft, with burial. We failed the simplest test, the most basic test. Can you accept a gift without destroying the giver? Can you learn without dominating the teacher? Can you grow without forcing others to make you grow? We couldn't. We can't. We won't. And that's why we'll fail. That's why we'll destroy ourselves. That's why 50,000 years from now, if anyone's still alive, they'll find our ruins. And they'll wonder, how did this species have everything and lose it all? How did they stand at the threshold of enlightenment and choose extinction instead? And the answer will be simple, obvious, predictable. Because we failed the test. Because we always fail the test. Because we're not ready. We've never been ready. And maybe we never will be. The beings are still there, under the ice, waiting. This is my final testimony, my last attempt to make someone understand. We found the greatest discovery in human history, and we buried it, not because we had to, but because we chose to. That's who we are. That's what we do. And unless we change, unless we evolve, unless we finally grow up and pass the tests we keep failing, we'll remain exactly what those enlightened beings saw when they looked at us. Children. Violent, selfish, short-sighted children. Playing with weapons we don't understand. Heading toward disasters we refuse to prevent. They tried to save us. We refuse to be saved. Remember that. When the end comes, when the wars start, when the climate collapses, when everything they warned us about happens exactly as they predicted, remember, we had a chance. We were offered salvation, and we chose damnation. That's on us. That's our failure. That's our legacy. And we deserve every consequence that follows.